Well, the whole project started about 4 years ago from a particular encounter that happened when I was a volunteer on an archaeology project at Preston Grange Industrial Museum in East Lothian. One local man called John Yeoman came into the museum and he brought in a number of his family snaps. And they were two little gems because one was actually a black and white negative at that stage of 3 boys swimming in the harbour, and he'd taken that picture when he was probably around 11 or 12. And the other image he had was a family snap, was an image of himself, and there he is with his hand on hip, stood next to his brother, and you could see lines of washing in the background. And these suddenly kind of like crystallise the kind of dramatic transformations these landscapes had happened. But at the same time, what was also being kind of like wiped away was the idea of someone's like personal history and memories. But people were very practical and pragmatic about it, saying, well, this is what it used to be like then, and now it's like this now, and be quite matter of fact about it. But it was like, I was really struck then about how do you bring the family snap together with like a kind of, like a photographer's approach, and convey that sense of change to a much wider audience, and also, work out why is it important. But I never had chance to work with John in terms of working with him closely. So that's why the pictures in the exhibition are shown separately, unlike all the others. They're the first pictures that started the project off, but also I was keen to kind of move beyond this juxtaposition of past and present. But obviously key to that was then, how do I do that as a photographer? What if I could work with people directly and their family photographs? And that's how the whole project evolved. And eventually, I was making contact with people like Elaine Mackey in the Doon Valley Museum, because Doon Valley has certain kinds of connections with Preston Grange. But this time I was thinking it'd be much more significant and challenging to work with somebody directly, for them to be involved with making the picture, and maybe a new way of making a picture about this idea of the kind of the past kind of almost like disappearing in front of our eyes, but connected to someone's living history would be really important. And so I went to see her first, and it was on a very rainy August day. Went to see her. I explained to her, I showed her the Preston Grange images, and she really reacted to the images and said that there was the kind of people that she knew that were involved with the history groups, and really were kind of concerned to kind of pass on their knowledge and their local knowledge, but also their sense of history. And then eventually, later on in the autumn, I came back to the Doon Valley Museum, and I met Drew, Mary and Anne for the first time. And we talked about the kind of project and the what I was hoping to achieve in the project. And so they really took it on, and we met again, and really we started off with lots of informal chat with cups of tea and biscuits, and looking at family photographs, family albums, looking at maps. And between the three of them, they were sort of explaining the areas that where they were from, or where they'd worked, and also how much had changed. And again, I found it very difficult to kind of visualize or picture. So then we had the idea of going out on what we call a kind of recce, kind of basically a walkout to look for one of the lost villages. And I was really caught by this idea of the lost villages, because that came up a lot in the conversations. And so what we did is that we had a fantastic December clear, sunny day, frost lying on the ground, and we had this walk around this where the village used to be, which was now actually a kind of forest, and we had sort of thing where we were following maps, and I was listening to, you know, their kind of memories and little anecdotes, but also they were really looking quite carefully, saying, yeah, this was here, that used to be there, so-and-so used to live there. And so I was just kind of listening to them really, and also looking at the landscape and trying to, you know, follow how they were looking at the landscape. So we did this sort of like a little exploratory trip around, and then when we came back, Mary agreed that she thought it would be a good idea to try and make a photograph. So the next time we went up there, I had my tripod and camera, and Mary had a photograph of her mother. And we went up to the very spot where her house originally was. And I realised then that she had spent a lot of time the night before really looking at the photograph and really thinking about where it might have been and looking at the details of the picture really carefully. And eventually she spotted the remnants of this house, which you could see in the photograph. And then from there she began to work out where her mother was. And then we'd set the camera up again, and I took several different points of view here while she was looking, and she'd say, and you could tell that she actually was connecting and convinced that we were actually in the right spot for where her mother stood. And then we'd go back to Doon Valley Museum, and Mary sat with me, and she told me where to put the picture. And that's obviously was the village which Mary grew up in, and where her mother also lived. And then you can see that there's this rather kind of mournful photograph of a boarded up building, which is actually Mary's school. And I'm hoping that the audience can look across to the images on the wall to make those connections between not only the family photograph but the other material, which kind of helps us make these journeys to kind of go back and try and find the places where these photographs were originally made. But it's always trying to keep the past and present in a relationship with one another. So it's not just like the past is over here and the present is over here. That's it.